So welcome everyone. Thank you for being there on this webinar for the working group number 4, Mathematics in Games. And so we are really happy to hear the work of Martijn Boussé, who will talk about the Calculus Legacy Comenius Teaching Fellow. So please take the floor, and then we will have a question or remarks for the end of the talk. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction. So yes, I will be talking today about our project called Calculus Legacy. And before that, I do that, I might first want to introduce myself. So I'm a assistant professor at the Department of Advanced Computing Sciences in Maastricht University. And I actually started out as a lecturer at Maastricht University, which means that I was mainly teaching for the last 3 years. But during that time, I was also doing a lot of education innovation projects, and also I was shifting towards more educational research. And so now I recently shifted to the assistant professor role, and the goal is to do more of this educational research. And so that's who I am. I'm also the coordinator of the Computing Sciences Education Research Group at our department, where actually the broader goal or the broader mission is we're trying to bring together ideas from data science, computer science, and AI to improve education. But one of the aspects that are also important in there is game-based learning. And that's where this fits in. So Calculus Legacy is actually an attempt to bridge my passions, my personal passion, and my work, my daily work. So in my daily life outside of work, I'm also a very big board game enthusiast, very big board game fan. And I have played several legacy games, and I thought, how can we somehow combine this idea together with teaching calculus? And that's actually what I set out with this project. And so together with a colleague, Katharina Schneider, we submitted a Comenius Teaching Fellow. And for those of you who don't know, the Comenius network is actually a very important education innovation network in the Netherlands. And they have these grants. They have 3 types of grants: the Comenius Teaching Fellow, which is 50,000 euros, the Comenius Senior Fellow, which is 100,000 euros, and then the Comenius Leadership Program, which is 500,000. And these grants are really meant to help and support teachers in educational innovation. And so this project here is the lowest tier. And we submitted this project to develop this calculus legacy game, let's say. So that's a little bit the background. And I was suggested by Dennis Summers, who is also involved in this group. And he suggested that maybe it could be interesting if I also present something here. So let me go to the next slide. The idea of Calculus Legacy is that we want to build a legacy-style physical board game to learn calculus through a narrative-driven campaign. Right? That's the one-sentence summary, let's say. And we want this to be a physical on-site board game because we think we already do too many things online, right? Like this meeting is also online. There are too many online things. So it's also nice to do some physical on-site things in a social interaction. So that's something we find very important. And we want to build a legacy game. And with a legacy game, what we mean is that there are multiple connected games where there is permanent change. So there will be certain unlocks, certain things that the students can unlock in this game that occur throughout the game, and the decisions are permanent and they're all connected to each other, right? And thirdly, there is some kind of dramatic arc. There is a narrative that is contextual and meaningful for the students. So the additional context that I can give here is that we want to build a board game that students can play in the first year of engineering science, for example, in a Bachelor of Science in the first year at university. And if they play through this game, if they play these multiple connected games, then at the end, hopefully they have learned calculus. That's the goal. That's what we want to try to accomplish. Let me think for a moment. Yeah, and we started actually from this because, well, when you teach calculus, you very quickly notice that some students, well, while I find this material very interesting and very wonderful, and I want to share that information, and I want to share my passion for it, students do not always find this very interesting. They find it an abstract and very abstract and um, sometimes even boring course. And so the goal here is to make it much more engaging and try to motivate them. So the idea is that this is a lean forward medium. They have to engage with it, and we want to motivate them. We want to engage them, and we want to inspire them. That's the aesthetics that we want to invoke in the students when they're playing this game. And so one aspect is that this is a form of small-scale teaching and learning, which also really aligns with the vision of Vision on Education by Maastricht University, right? The core elements there are that we do problem-based learning, that we do small-scale teaching, and that it needs to be international and societal relevant, right? And those elements we also want to build into that game. We also want it to be program relevant topics. In this case, we're building this game specifically for a circular engineering program. But we want to build the game in such a way that, in principle, it should be translatable to any other program. But we build it now for circular engineering as a case study. And we also want to inspire the students. So when they're playing this game, we really want them to think, oh, wow, this is what I can do with math. Nice. Is there anything else I can do with math, right? So we really want to inspire them. By the way, if there's any questions in the meantime, just let me know. I see there was something in the chat. Okay.
No,
Nothing for me right now.
no.
Yeah. Okay. So this project, this Comenius project started basically in August, right? So we're not working that long yet on this project. And in the beginning of the project in August, what I did is I joined this training session on ludodidactics. And this is actually something offered by HKU or HKU, Hogeschool voor de Kunsten in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And they have a game design or a game program where people can learn to build physical but also online games. And one of the things that they focus on is this idea of ludodidactics, where they are trying to use game design principles to develop educational experiences. And that really fits in the idea here. I was very inspired by this training session, and what I'm trying to do right now is use those principles in the development of this game. And some of the elements that we learned there are, the first idea was this MDA model, which stands for mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. So the mechanics is what are the core actions that you do in the game, right? The mechanic could be throwing a die. The dynamics is the focus on the action. So what are the actions that you're doing? And the aesthetics is what feelings that the game invokes in you, right? And what we're trying to do here is we're co-developing this game with students, right? It's a co-creation effort. So I'm not designing this on my own. We're designing this with a team, including students. And we have decided on the aesthetics, and I mentioned them already here. It's motivation, engagement, and inspiration. Those things are the aesthetics that we want to invoke. And that then defines certain dynamics, certain actions and behaviors that you want in the game. And that then defines certain mechanics that you need in the game, right? So that's the design direction. We define aesthetics, dynamics, mechanics, and usually the players engage with this in the reverse way. They engage with the mechanics to get to certain dynamics, to get to certain aesthetics. Then we also have this epic epistemic idea where we think about the different roles or the different behaviors that players have in this game, and we can think about the behaviors, the um, the values and the norms that players have in this game. And then finally also the play loop. So we have to define some kind of series of actions that happen by which the game will start running. There is a certain play loop, and by doing that play loop, the game comes to life, basically. And so these principles, we're trying to use them to develop an educational game. Now, the consortium of this project, I think, has all the required expertise to make this really a success. So if you look at the people we've tried to bring together here, is mainly people from Maastricht University, but we also tried to look a little bit further. And one of the experts that we have in our consortium is Stefan Jonge, who is a problem-based learning expert. Problem-based learning is the main paradigm or teaching paradigm that we use at Maastricht University. And if you look at the idea that we have here closely, it's basically, if you really want to reduce it, it's basically a set of PBL sessions, problem-based learning sessions, that are connected through a story and that have a game element to it. If you really want to reduce it, that's basically what we're doing. We also have assessment experts in there. We have the program coordinator for the program where we're building this game in there. And as I mentioned before, we also have a co-creation expert because I really believe in co-developing, co-designing this game with students, right? And that's also what you see at the bottom there. There are 3 student assistants that we hired with the money of this grant to actually help us develop this. And these are two third-year students and 1 second-year student. And constantly when we're doing focus groups and playtests, we're engaging all the students in the circular engineering program. We also involved education research experts and also a game designer from Avans Hogeschool to help us with developing the game. All right. So any questions about the initial setup before I go into more of the specifics of the game? I don't see any questions yet. Okay, so that's great. Okay, so we started out with trying to set up this game, and one of the first things that I need to explain is how our educational period works in Maastricht University. So our academic year is divided into 6 periods: period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and period 1 and 2 and 4 and 6 are about 7 weeks long, and periods 3 and 6 are about 2.5 weeks long, approximately. And so calculus, my course, would run in the first period, which is about 6 weeks long. And what we want to do is that this game would run for 1 period, 6 weeks, and multiple play sessions are occurring during the tutorial sessions. So usually here in Maastricht, you have 1 lecture and 2 tutorials every week. These sessions usually take 90 minutes, 1.5 hours. So what we would like to do is we still keep our lecture structure. There will still be lectures on all of the topics. And then in the first tutorial each week, we will play the game with a fixed group of 4 to 5 students. And then afterwards, there is a second tutorial where we will do a sort of a recap to make sure everyone has got the ILOs, everyone is on the same page, and we're ready to move on, right? Because we need a little bit of a moment to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And so in that way, every week we will play the game 1, game 2, up to game 6. And at the end, because this is a legacy game where there is permanent change, permanent decisions and unlocks, at the end of this session, of these 6 weeks, this group of students will have one final group unique board game. Everyone will have their own board game at the end, and that is what we will use or hope to use for the final assessment. So there won't be an actual traditional exam, but at the end, the students will come in as a group or one by one. I don't know yet. We have to think about that. But we will have an oral examination using their board game that lies in front of us. Basically, this final group unique board game that they have created by going through this legacy aspect is a sort of a portfolio. And they present that portfolio to me, and that way I can assess if they mastered the ILOs of calculus or not. Now, in addition to this game, all of the students will have a player sheet or a player booklet, is what I call it. And basically, this is a booklet where they will start out in the beginning by saying, or in the front pages of the booklet, we will make clear, so this is the course, it's calculus, and these are the ILOs. This is what we want you to achieve. And they will have to do sort of self-reflection. And then after each session, each game session, they will engage in that self-reflection and that self-assessment of their calculus skills. So we really want to move from outcome-based assessment to more process-based assessment that is facilitated by going through this game. All right, so that's a little bit the setup. Now, each game session introduces a narrative assignment that the group has to solve as a team. And here's one of the sessions that we've been playtesting with. So I'll quickly read it to you. So this is an assignment that I've used a similar assignment in the past. So the assignment is, in a quiet Belgian town, and I speak about Belgium because I am from Belgium, a new abbey has emerged, home to the Martinian monks, also inspired by my name, renowned for their age-old wisdom and newfound passion for brewing. These monks have crafted a Trappist beer so remarkable that the International Trappist Association has honored them with the prestigious authentic Trappist product label. And you see, we Belgians are very proud of our beer. And as their brew prepares to go global, there's one final piece of the puzzle, the perfect beer glass. The Martinian monks have called upon your engineering team to design a vessel worthy of their creation, but be warned, they have some very particular requirements. So that's the setup. That's how they start the session, and this would be a session somewhere more towards the end of this timeline here, right? They wouldn't start with this one. Okay, and so this is what they get, and then there are specific requirements, right? Each of these assignments has a list of initial requirements that kickstarts the discussion. So basically what they have to do here is design a glass, a beer glass, should be chalice shaped, and the glass must hold exactly 33 centiliters of this beer, and the walls of the glass must be thick enough to prevent breakage. So that sets the setting. And now they will have to use, in this particular setting, they have to use their integration skills. So computing integrals and using integrals to compute things such as volumes and surface areas and thickness and mass center and so on. There's a lot of things you can compute with integrals, and we see that in the lecture. They learn how to do that, and then here they can apply that to help them design this glass. Now, these game sessions will be interconnected with permanent changes and unlocks carrying over, as I said before. And probably this beer glass design will be one of the later topics. So you see there's basically 6, maybe 7 topics in calculus. We talk about functions. We talk about limits so that we can introduce concepts like continuity. We talk about derivatives, applications of derivatives, such as optimization, integrals and applications of integrals, such as computing volumes and surface areas and things like that. And together with my student assistant team, we started out with this beer glass design, and now we're trying to develop other assignments or other game sessions. And what they're working on right now is that, well, before the beer glass design, there could be a session on decoding the recipe, right? For example, the recipe of the beer and the numbers that you need in the recipe, they're actually the outcome of definite integrals. So they will have to solve integrals to figure out the recipe for the beer. And then in the next one, they design the beer glass. And in the session 4, we talk, for example, about the vegetable garden where they grow things to put in their beer. And in order to optimize that vegetable garden, they need optimization techniques, and so on and so on. What we're not yet so clear on is how we're going to introduce functions and limits, because these are a little bit trickier topics. But this is how we would basically see this particular narrative. And I've chosen for a beer-focused topic, let's say, because I'm from Belgium. I think that's fine. Okay. Now, before a game session, students will have to prepare a semi-overlapping pre-task, which diversifies the starting point. So, for example, in this integral computation assignment, there is maybe a common pre-task which involves area calculation and volume calculation with a specific method. But then one student focuses on 2 other methods, and student 2 focuses on the shell method, and students 3 and 4 focus on even other calculations. So they all bring something to the table, and I hope that that creates some interdependency and motivation to play this game and do this together. Okay. Now, after a game session, as I mentioned before, each student will have to reflect on their performance and their experience in their own player booklet. And they have to reflect on the intended learning outcomes, that's the content part, but also on their team role. So I will talk a little bit more about that later. Everyone will also have a role. And then they also need to summarize the materials. Okay. Yeah. Any questions about the general format of the game? No, great. Okay, then we can go to the gameplay part. So now we get more into the specifics of how the game actually plays while they're in the room. And basically, this game has 3 key elements for now. It's an event tag system, there's role-playing, and there's a player booklet. The event tag system, I think, I think I have it a little bit later. So basically, they get this assignment, and then there is a deck, a stacked deck with events. And these events can either be action events or decision events, and they drive the story. There's also role-playing, so every student will get a role, and that role will define how they will behave in the game. Each role has behavior attached to it, but also a secret goal attached to it. And then finally, the player booklet, as I've explained before. Here you can see a very, very early prototype on the left, right? It's very bare bones because, yes, we are just working with print and play at the moment. So there's an assignment, there is a role deck, there's an event tag. There's also, in one variation, we had a side quest, something optional that they could do. And initially, we had that events could happen with a random chance. You roll a d8, and on 4 to 8, something happens. From 1 to 3, nothing happens. And the reason why we wanted to do something like that is because now you can play with that in the legacy aspect. Maybe for some teams that, for example, would underperform, right? Because we create these groups randomly at the start of the course. So maybe there are some groups that are less good and some groups that are really good. And the students that are not that, the groups that are not that great, you could add something like if they underperform, that if they roll a 1, 2, 3, they get access to a help deck or an extra hint deck or something. So through the legacy aspect, we can then play with that. But in the early playtests, they didn't really like that, and they preferred a set timer. So every 5 minutes, something happens. And on the right, you see them playing. So the first students on the left and the right are 2 of my student assistants who are observing how they're playing. They're making notes. I was training them on how to do observations during these playtests. And of course, there's also drinks and snacks because that attracts a lot of students. And then in the back, you see them playing, and they were actually super engaged. They really were super engaged in this assignment. They really liked it. They were really going for it. And I have never seen them in that way before. So this was really amazing to see how intense they went for this. So that's the initial prototype and the atmosphere. Yeah, a little bit more about the roles. So right now we have the following roles on the left. So there's a leader, a contact, a timekeeper, completer, supporter, mediator, scout, and strategist. And to give an idea of what these mean, for example, the leader should coordinate the team, delegate tasks, and define goals. Their ability is that they can always take the final decision for event cards. So they can always overrule. They can say, no, this is the direction we're going to take. The personal goals that they should not share is, for example, make sure that every team member is working on something, right? Which really makes sense to make sure that everyone is collaborating and doing something. The contact, you're the only one in contact with the client, and the client is me, basically the tutor who is there present at the tutorial. And the ability is you can ask up to 3 questions to the client throughout the game about the content. And that's the only thing you can do, right? It's the only way you have access to the client. Personal goal, solve a problem of the group by obtaining an answer from the client. Then the last one that I want to show is the timekeeper. You make sure that the team stays on track. The ability is once per game, you can postpone the event timer. So you can give the group a little bit of time to make sure that they can finish everything they need to finish. Right, so those are the roles, and these roles can change throughout each game session. Yes, here's an example from the event deck. So there are decisions and there are action events. So here's an example in this beer design decision. I called it the stack or scale dilemma. So Brother Hubert, the monastery's meticulous storage and transportation expert, speaks up with a critical issue. Should the glass be designed to be as light as possible, or should it be stackable for efficient packaging? You must choose which constraint to optimize. So keep the glass lightweight or design the glass to stack efficiently. And this is actually my sneaky way to incorporate ideas about sustainability and circularity, because these are circular engineers. And one of the things that they, well, in course feedback, what they say is that, okay, we get calculus, but calculus is disconnected from the theme of our program, right? We are going to become circular engineers. So why don't we do any assignments on calculus that have to do with circularity and sustainability? Well, here you put that in there in a very not too on the nose way, and then they can think about this and they can integrate those ideas that they get from other courses in their calculus course. Now, there are also action events. So, for example, the head monk's grand demand. So this Father Martinian feels that he is left out of the work, and he declares that he needs to know the external volume of this beer glass right now. And so this is a task, compute the external volume of the glass design right now. And we can play with these decision and action events. So basically what we will do is we create a stacked event deck where in the beginning there are more decision events and towards the end there are more action events, which makes a lot of sense because in the beginning you want them to brainstorm and diverge, and at the end you want them to mainly compute things and deliver something. All right, so we've done already a couple of playtests. So this is playtest 1.1, by which I mean this is well, I start counting with 0, so this is prototype 1, not prototype 0, and playtest 1. And the observations were, if I look at them play, is that there are some very practical issues that pop up when you're developing a game. Like I had these role cards and I had the role and the personal goal on the card. But then I asked them, you hand out 3 role cards to each student and you can look at them. And if you you choose one and then you pass along the rest. So it's sort of drafting element in there. But then of course you know the hidden goal that you shouldn't know. So that's a little bit of a silly mistake on my end, and these kinds of practical implementation details we can get out of there by doing these play tests. I noticed that they didn't like that the event text was so long. They wanted to be shorter. We need a very big visual timer for the events. right? Because every so many minutes an event happens, but because they're so into the game, they don't notice that the event timer hit 5 minutes. So they forget and they just keep on working while they actually should draw an event, which is in some way good, right? They're so engaged that they're not even looking at the event timer. This is a typical engineering issue, but unit conversions are sometimes very messy, so they struggle with that. The circularity theme is circularity theme was originally added throughout the game. I don't remember what I mean with that, so I'm going to skip that. The final submission can be a bit messy because they're really into it. They're calculating things, and at the end they think, oh no, we still have to do this, this, and this, and then things get a little bit messy. So I need to think about how they submit their final thing. Then some of the main elements in this feedback. So what they all were saying is, this is amazing, this is high energy, this is fun. I like this. This is really a cool way to learn calculus. They also mentioned that sometimes it felt a bit rushed, but that's of course because these playtests take 30 minutes and the actual tutorial would be 90 minutes. So they would have 3 times as much time. They liked the monk theme, so the monks and the beer. Every event decision guided them into the right direction. They felt that that really helped them. Sometimes they thought that events are a little bit subjective, right? Like the one that I showed you before. It's not very concrete, and they wanted more numerical constraints, more concrete constraints. But of course, that's also one of the things that you have to learn as an engineer, to translate the subjective language to concrete numerical constraints. The action events they liked a lot, and they said, okay, maybe you need this tiered or this phased event system. So this was actually an idea that came from them. All right, here's a playtest from a previous prototype. So this was prototype 0 playtest 5. And here what we saw was that the leader immediately took charge. That was really nice. But they could have divided the tasks better. So what happened was actually that the leader would just do everything instead of dividing the work, which is kind of weird. But we saw that happening a couple of times. For some students, the learning goals were not clear, which is something that I should improve on my end by actually implementing this player booklet, but I didn't get to that yet. And these earlier playtests, they were not writing enough on paper. They just kept discussing. And that was one of the reasons to add these action events, to force them to actually do something, now write it down. They were postponing event decisions. So what we did now is we added basically an event penalty. So they have to make a decision in 1 minute. If they don't take the decision in 1 minute, they get an event penalty. And if there are too many event penalties, this could mean a reduction in the grade in the end. And in some of these playtests, the team dynamics were going south really quickly, because you get certain people who are very dominant, or people who are very, how shall I say it, disagreeable. And this very quickly leads to issues. And so that's one of the reasons why we eventually added this mediator role. The role of the mediator is to safeguard team dynamics, and that seemed to help. Okay, then the feedback here was, this was very stressful, this was overwhelming. And the second one, they said, I don't see why we need to connect circularity to the assignment, feels forced. And the reason for that is because the assignment itself said, you need to connect this to circularity themes, or to things that you learned in your circular engineering course. And that felt too forced. So now we put it in there sneakily through these events, instead of putting it directly into the assignment. They said it went by very quickly. They liked that. It was very engaging. Time went by. They also said that maybe we need a different setup, because they were just sitting around the table and they felt like we need to stand up, we need to walk around, we need to write on whiteboards. So they immediately said we need space, we need room to move around. And some people said, well, I really like this theme, and other people said, I really don't like this theme. Because for certain cultural backgrounds, beer is an issue, right? Alcohol is an issue. They don't like that, and they don't want to work with that. And I understand that, and that's a tricky thing, right? The theme is not for everyone. Okay. The player booklet is something I still need to do. And here are the next steps. So what we're doing right now is, together with the student assistants, developing these other assignments so that we have a few sessions, and then we want to start playtesting the legacy aspect so that we have the same group of playtesters that play a couple of sessions in a row to see if the legacy aspect is fitting, if it helps. We are doing playtesting. We are adding some new game elements like this tiered event deck. We are going to improve the roll cards. We are maybe also going to introduce ILO, intended learning outcome tokens, that they can basically earn by doing certain things in the game. And then next game elements are these legacy elements, because that's very tricky to add, because basically we're developing 6 games, and then we have to think about how we connect those 6 games to each other. So that makes it very challenging. And we also want to add some new education elements. So how would we address the assessment in the course? Do we do an assessment every week? Do we only do an assessment at the end? How do we deal with this process-based assessment versus outcome-based assessment, and so on? And we want to set up an experiment where the ideal goal is that in P1 next year, so that's September, October next year, I'm going to run this game in parallel to the course, where one half of the course will have the classic setup and one half of the course will have the calculus legacy setup. And we are still trying to figure out how we're going to motivate that to the ethics committee. And then in November, I have the Ludodidactics Comeback Day, where I will give a similar presentation as this one to talk about the things that we have done. Okay, so that concludes the presentation side. So what I attempted to do with this presentation is I wanted to give you an update of what's going on here, and to give you an idea of what we're doing. And I was hoping to get some feedback from your side, right? And it can be as brutally honest as you want, right? Because we're still in the very early phases, and if you think like this doesn't sound right, or maybe this can be done better, now is the time that I need the feedback, right? Because now I can still change things. So if you have anything to add, please tell me, so that we can actually end this project hopefully successfully. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Martijn. So now if people have questions, please open your video, open your mic, and just ask question. I have a few myself. So perhaps I can start to break the ice, let's say. I thought it was really, really interesting. And one remark before I ask a question is that it's always really difficult to see if your game-based session will work, or will show that students learn better, because you can't go back in the time and try with the game and without the game and then compare how it was using the game. So it's extremely difficult when you're dealing with the students and or kids, even with kids. And you raised like an essential problem is how can we have 2 groups of students, one with the game and the other group without the game, and how will they feel that by ethically speaking? So that's a great question, and I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's a good point that you raise.
I can maybe comment a little bit on that. So how we are going to try to motivate this is, my current course in calculus has basically 3 main assessment components. There's the exam for 50%, there's the assignments for 30%, and then there are weekly graded quizzes for 20%. And basically what this is going to replace, let's say, is the assignments for 30% and the weekly graded quizzes for 20%. So what I will argue to the ethics committee is we can do this because basically these are two alternative implementations of PBL.
Mm.
And we don't know which one is better. Well, we have an assumption, but we don't know. So I think it's perfectly fine to have these two different interpretations of PBL running next to each other. And I hope that they will agree with that argumentation.
Yeah, sure. And so my question was really simple. Did you mention how many students you have in this course? How many students are involved in this course?
No, I should have said that. Yeah, good point. So this is circular engineering. So we're talking about 50 students in the first year.
Okay.
So ideally, this is something that I would like to run at a larger scale as well. So I also teach at a business engineering program where we have 240 students, and that would be the next step. But these kinds of innovations, I first want to try them out on a smaller scale, and then we can hopefully scale up, possibly attract some additional money to do that scale up in larger courses.
Okay, thank you. Any other question?
Yeah, okay, that might be a stupid question, but there was this example with the circularity engineering with the stacking of the glasses or lightweight glasses, and I don't know anything about circular engineering, so I don't know which one is the solution that is more sustainable.
So this is, I think both can be, let's say, sustainable. Just depends on the motivation. So the idea here is that ideally in these decision events, there is no right or wrong. There is just a choice, and you have to motivate that choice by using your skills from calculus, right? So you can say, okay, I want to keep this glass lightweight, so I'm going to compute the mass of this glass using integral techniques, or you're going to try to efficiently stack them, and then you need to think about the cross-sectional area of your glass, and then you need to use other tools from integration. So either way, sorry, they're showing skills in calculus.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions?
I have one. Have you considered the idea of letting the students find the initial story, and instead of you imposing the monk and the beer glass problem, that they think of a problem by themselves, and that could be also something to solve this, for example, problem of culture and the fact that loving beer is not international.
Yeah, unfortunately, no.
Sadly, but it is.
Yes, no, good point. So what I have been doing until now in calculus and in linear algebra is I give them an assignment where I basically say, hey, you need to show these ILOs. I don't care how you do it, right? Figure it out. So basically they have to figure out an assignment and solve it. The only thing that I'm telling them is these are the ILOs you need to show. And that's what I've been doing until now. And that's very interesting to see what happens there. Really interesting reports and assignments that they figure out. I really love that. But of course, if we're going to do this legacy aspect, we want a narrative, a story that goes on, where there are decisions that are permanent and that have an effect, a lasting effect, and unlocks. So then you need to do it more curated. You need to have some say in the story. And indeed, maybe we need to rethink this beer aspect. Now, on the other hand, Maastricht University is a very international university, right? So I think it's also fine to look into other cultures, right? And maybe here we're talking about Belgium with the beer culture, and that should also be fine, I think.
It occurs to me that one easy alternative to beer glasses is reusable coffee cups. Our campus has now gone entirely over to reusable. Well, first of all, they went over to reusable coffee cups, which brought their own. You paid your €2 deposit and you got your money back if you returned your cup, but people tended to keep the cups. They've now reversed that slightly, and this makes it even more complicated as a narrative, in that if you're having your cup of coffee in the coffee shop, you can get a ceramic mug. But if you're taking it to go, you use the plastic Go cup with the €2 deposit. And that has all sorts of different narratives going, which is interesting. The international medical students get their coffee in their coffee cups in the medical and health sciences cafe, pay their €2 deposit, but they don't bother to return the cups. In many cases, they just throw them in the bin. So poor art students can go over to medical sciences and take the reusable coffee cups out of the bin and cash them in for the €2 deposits. So there's a whole load of different narratives going on there, but it's very close to the beer glass problem, because the shape, the size, all these things for the cup, still apply, which is and it fits with sustainability, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. So that's perhaps a different narrative that we could use. And I've done something similar in the past. I had this assignment where it was all about I think there the narrative was, I'm going to organize a party and I need this much liter of a soft drink at this party. What's actually the best way to get that soft drink there? Right? Is that plastic bottles or glass bottles? And that was also an interesting narrative. So yeah, that's definitely possible. Now, what I also want to add is we would like to make this game in such a way that there's a blueprint. And if you have time and you're motivated, then as a calculus teacher, you can say, oh, this is the structure. I just fill in my own narrative. I decide on my own assignments, my own events and action events, and you can build your own game, right? So that's really how we would like to design it, that it's basically a blueprint that others can reuse. So hopefully, after some time, that's my dream, there's not one game, but there are 20 different versions of this game. In some way, I like to see it a little bit as I'm also a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. And in Dungeons and Dragons, there's a rule set, and then there's many different narratives that all kinds of dungeon masters can invent with that basic rule set. And that's also a little bit the vision that I have for this. There's a rule set, and anyone can fill in whatever narrative they want, and that fits for their program.
So just a question about the mechanics of the game. So the students play the game in every meeting, but the progress is, so like the game goes throughout the whole period, and then or each meeting is like a different portion of the game, or like they can just continue where they left off, or
Yeah. So every tutorial session of 90 minutes is basically a game session. So this is basically week 1 of the period. There's a lecture usually on Mondays, and then tutorial on Wednesday, tutorial on Friday, and that repeats. So basically every Wednesday they would play this game, and it's one session. You play the whole game once, but there are certain choices and unlocks that carry over to the next game with a different assignment and a different topic. And again, you play the whole game, and then you carry over to week 3 and so on. All right. Good.
And you said you tested the game with colleagues of yours or other teachers, and What kind of motivation did you notice or of involvement? Was it the same than for the students? How was it received?
So I played it once, also with staff and one student, so that might change a little bit the setup. But I felt that it was perceived in a positive way. So they actually tried the assignment, they tried to figure it out, they actually played the game, and they liked the motivating aspect of it, like the narrative, like, okay, this is really a concrete thing, we're doing this, we're engaged.
Mm.
And that was actually nice to see that they were actually engaged in the game, which is always a little bit trickier, I think, with staff.
Yeah.
But we will do it again, right? So, you know, in the end, this is a game that should be designed for students. So I don't know how much information you get out of playing it with staff, gameplay wise, but I think playing it with staff is mainly useful for the more technical aspect of how does the game play, how are the mechanics and the dynamics. They will focus on other things, also things like ILOs and how will you assess this, and that's more interesting with staff. While with students, you will focus more on the experience, on the aesthetics, how things are experienced by the students.
Okay. Okay. So what would be nice is to have another lecture from you after the experience, and then you could show us the results of that if the students succeed at the exams, or I mean to have the whole feedback of the experiment.
Yes, I would definitely want to come back next year in October, November. Then hopefully, if everything goes right, then we have played this game once throughout a whole period with a new batch of students. So that will be very interesting to see.
Yeah, sure. Well, it was really interesting. Anyway, any other question from the audience? No? Ori, you have a question?
I don't. I'm just since it's the end, I just thought I'd show myself.
Yeah,
So.
great. Okay, well, I think we can thank you again, Martin, because it was really interesting, and we are. I'm looking forward the next results. So thank you very much, everyone, for being there, and we will have another webinar in November. So pay attention to the Discord groups and the Google groups, and we are trying to give the information through these channels. So thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
Have all a nice afternoon or dinner if it's time for dinner. I don't know. I know that there are many people from everywhere around the world, so have a nice rest of the day.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.